beautiful. When you also then talked about, as you were walking, you started to learn much more about homelessness, not just your own insights, and you shared some of those posts as well. Maybe we can just dip our toe into some of what you learnt as you were walking about homelessness here.
Well, I learnt a little bit about programs and guidelines to the design of emergency shelters, I guess. And I also learnt a bit more about Hobart Women's Shelter.
Right.
I realised that because I was so focused on homelessness and emergency shelter for women, that as I scanned through various feeds that I follow, I was picking up information here, there and everywhere. And so one was a New South Wales guideline to the actual design of emergency shelter for women in domestic violence. And so that was fascinating as a checklist because, you know, I'm continually working in the area of social or affordable housing, doing that kind of designing, albeit for people in not necessarily women's shelters, but other. So that was very useful. And then Hobart Women's Shelter itself, first of all, it operates Tasmania-wide. And a dear younger colleague who is a pretty close friend of mine, I learnt how involved she has been in working with them. And then I actually have been in touch. They reached out to me just to thank me for this fundraising that I'd done, and I guess offered to do advocacy should they wish that of me at any stage. They explained that, in fact, and again we're talking about the ripple effect, their emergency shelters that they have are chockers and people don't move through them fast enough to deal with everyone else. They turn away 8 out of 10 people who approach them, plus their families, because there's a shortage of rental stock. So we know what's happened in Tasmania. There's, haven't been enough social and affordable housing built over the last number of decades, but also the rise of Airbnb and investment properties as Tasmania's kind of become the flavour of the month has put a real pressure on availability of rental housing. So Hobart Women's Shelter are actually beginning to raise funds, and this is what their Buy a Brick campaign is about, to acquire land and to build housing for longer term occupation, accommodation, so that they can actually get a little bit of flow through. It's a state problem, really.
I can remember reading that in one of your posts on Instagram where you said 8 out of 10 people are turned away, and my emotional response was not just for the people who are turned away, also for the people who are working at the Hobart Women's Shelter having to do that. Must break their hearts.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what I'm also aware of is, the resources that are needed to actually give those fortunate ones support to actually empower them to move on. Whether it is access to psychologists or whether it is learning how to grow a vegetable garden or whether it is literacy or
financial management,
all kinds of things, finding a job, finding how to cope with their children, apart from, dealing with restraining orders and safe refuge. So I felt that my understanding was literally just scraping the surface. And so my particular lens is around the design of housing that supports individuals in community.
And you designed the community housing project up in Marlin Road in South Hobart. That was on the news the other night about a group of women talking about just how much they loved living there. So your interest has gone back many, many, many years. And obviously your design concepts work because here they are. How long ago did you do that project?
Gosh, we started that in the mid-90s and it actually just got underway in 1997. And so really they fairly recently, a few years ago, had their 20-year anniversary. And that was the first government-funded co-housing development. So in actual fact, it was a cooperation between the tenants as well as the government, and they've subsequently, the occupants have actually bought the housing and manage it, but it's co-housing.
Right.
Yeah.
It was on the news.
Okay.
And one woman was a woman who would have faced homelessness except for this opportunity came up, and she said she just cannot believe her good fortune, not just to have a home, but now also to have a community that really comes around and supports her. And that is a product of the design of that co-housing facility. So congratulations.
Yes, and thank you. And very much the initiative of a few people who had been a street kid at one stage. They certainly drove the whole thing, and it was a very collaborative approach, developing the brief and the design, and their sheer persistence over a number of years to actually acquire the land and to broker the deal with the Department of Housing. To pull it off was remarkable.
Wow, well done. Because you were instrumental in helping to facilitate that. I see that you've made some notes, which is so fantastic.
Yes.
And if you scan your notes, is there anything else you'd really like to share?
Well, yes, I was thinking about this morning, and when I look at my notes, over and over and over, the word that comes up is the word gift. And they're the gifts that this program gave to me, as well as the gifts that have come to all of us, I believe. So the first one is the gift of COVID. So when my husband was ill with COVID and I was in isolation for 10 days, I had the gift of 10 days where I did a really in-depth inquiry into my Christian upbringing, actually, and a very deep questioning of what was relevant of it in terms of my values and how I am living my life. And that was an invaluable time. The second gift was the gift of being over 60 and transitioning in my life. Our son has left home, and both of my parents have now died, and that has seen me transition, as well as the aging process, to a different stage in my life. And both of those two meditations, I suppose, made it really clear to me, one earlier on and then the COVID meditation, on the fact that it is my time and my desire to give back to my community and to live with generosity and with compassion. And those have been my guiding principles since I turned 60. They've seen me step way out of my comfort zone, both in my professional life, when I took on being the president of the Institute of Architects for the Tasmanian chapter, and in something like this, where I was willing to expose myself, take the risk of not managing to raise a cent, and, I have a fear of failure, I guess. But in the end, if one's intention is sound, well, it actually is immaterial. That's immaterial.
Yes. In the end, you raised an incredible amount of money.
I did. And, part of that was good friends supporting me. No question about it. And I wear my heart on my sleeve a bit. My friends know when I go through tough times. And I'm very fortunate that I do have friends around the world who have come to my support when I've needed it. And during the first year of the COVID lockdowns and everything, I was going through a personal journey, which was very challenging. And I had, my best friend from when I was 13, who lives in Canada, just giving me some guidance, which actually enabled me to turn my life around. And she was one of the first donors. And I'm just so grateful to everyone who showed their appreciation both for the cause and for me, you know. And then the last donation was a corporate donation of $1,000, which just took me completely by surprise. And someone who's a friend as well, but who I haven't seen much over the 30 years since I met him, a fellow architect, who's just quietly been saying, he said, what I give to the community. And he wanted to show his appreciation of that. And, you know, the fact that it's going into a good cause is absolutely wonderful.
Marvellous. So rich a walk that you've done, and so beneficial for all of 100 Women Squared community as well, not just for the Hobart Women's Shelter, but for all of us. And I think you absolutely inspired other people to walk. So that's a lovely one of those ripple effects as well. Just to conclude, is there anything else that you'd really like to share?
Well, yes, actually, because when I looked at the walking over the 30 days, 100 Ks over 30 days, one of the clever aspects, I think, of how 100 Women to motivate it is, well, that's 3.3 kilometres a day. And my tendency, because I am my harshest critic, was to think, oh, you know, oh, what's special about me doing that? But what it did was, by spreading it out over the 30 days, it gave me the time to really deepen this understanding and appreciation of the cause that I was working for. It allowed me to just chip away at asking people for donations. It gave them time to actually make that decision to either contribute or not. And I actually do suggest that a gentle unfolding of a cause over time is a wonderfully effective way of doing this.
I think in a way the walking then works us. You know, as we're walking, we get worked by the walking and also by the cause.
Absolutely.
And the intentionality as well.
Absolutely. I don't think that one can, or certainly I couldn't, undertake this without emerging changed. Who knows on what subtle levels and some obvious levels, of course. But it is certainly an event that is a standout event in my life. And, you know, when you approached me, Mary, we had been walking recreationally in the state, and you said, well, why don't you do this walk? And my very initial reaction was, why would I? Yeah. And then I turned it upside down and I thought, why wouldn't I? When someone, and this is about, I guess, generosity, so this was a response to you putting yourself out there, I thought, how courageous to actually publicly launch this vision of 100 women walking, committed to raising $1,000 each. Why wouldn't I? What would stop me doing that? And so it was a big yes, just remarkable. And congratulations, because I came away from it really enriched.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
What a lovely way to finish. So if anyone is listening to this and you want to know more, then please have a look at Yvette's posts on her Instagram. And we'll do links as well to all of this. Also to 100 Women Squared on the marycdwyer.com website, and also 100 Women Squared on Facebook and Instagram as well. And when you listen to this pod, I would love you to share it as far and wide as possible. Listen to this amazing experience of Yvette walking her 100 kilometres and raised over $4,000 for Hobart Women's Shelter by a Brick campaign. So thank you, and please feel free to top up her donations if you are so inspired. So thank you, Yvette, for your time today. Thank you for doing the recording. Thank you for walking, and thank you for being such an inspirational member of our community.
It's absolutely my pleasure. Thank you.